In last week's main video episode, we went to Gili Gedi, which is part of the secret gillies which lie off the southwest coast of Labuan. No, not Labuan, Lombok.
Lombok. We're currently in Labuan.
Yes.
Still, after all these weeks. But yes, it was in Lombok.
It's been great too. We love it here. So this was yet another place we've been to that's remote-ish. It's not as remote as some of the places we've been to, but it is quite remote in that there are other islands around that area that people go to, but they always miss this particular island out.
I mean, compared to somewhere like this, which is extremely touristy, as we explained, we're in the same place as last week's last podcast, where we're on Flores in Labuan Bajo. And this is a known destination because it's where Komodo is, the island, the dragons, whereas Gili Gedi is far less known, isn't it? It's just really not on the tourist hotspot trail, is it?
Which is bizarre because it is right next to Bali, one of the biggest hotspots in the world, which is why we found it quite strange that this beautiful, stunning, like a mini Maldives is almost untouched. And we went round the island with Joe and we talk all about it. So if you've missed it, look for 345, we'll put it somewhere, to find out more about Gili Gedi. Anyway, it did present a comment from Ross Harris: do not go tourist, it'll destroy your island and your lives. It always ends the same: learn now without the bad experience. And we always get comments from people saying when we're in these places, keep it secret.
Yeah, we've come across this pretty much for the entire time we've been traveling, and not even just YouTubing. Even before we were YouTubing, some people just prefer to discover places themselves, to discover it organically, I suppose, rather than relying on other sources, i.e. YouTube, Instagram, and some people even go as far as not even buying pilot books because they don't want to see where other yachties, for example, have anchored. They want to discover the places themselves.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say on that.
Oh, have you?
Basically, I think it's stupid, so there you are. That's the end of that. Well, how do they find these places in the first place? How does a tourist find these places unless they go and look in the right areas? It used to be Lonely Planet and all those places, and now we've got lots of stuff up online. So that's how you find places to then make the decision about where you want to go. So we put this out, didn't we? We put it out across our various places online and asked you what you think. Do you think we should not be highlighting these beauty spots, particularly the very remote places? Should we or shouldn't we? So we got lots of replies, and you've done quite a bit of research. So first of all, we're going to say all the reasons why you should. And that is pretty much what most people said, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's worth bearing in mind that we are in our own little echo chamber because we put this question out on our own social media. So inevitably, the people who are responding are going to be people that are, I guess, invested in our own travels, our videos and our posts on social media anyway. So there is going to be a skew, I think.
Hello, I'm Liz.
And I'm Jamie.
Welcome to Follow the Boat, in which we discuss what it's really like to give it all up to live on a boat.
And go travelling around the world. We've been doing it since 2006 and we're still at it.
Each week we talk about our latest YouTube videos.
And about boats, sailing, travel or anything else which floats into our heads.
And if you leave a comment we like, we'll give you an answer and a name check. Peace and fair winds. First of all, on the plus side, there are reasons why it's a good thing that YouTube channels expose and bring back beautiful videos of these places, isn't there?
Yes, there's got to be. There has to be. We will say that, of course, because that's what we're doing. But I think, first and foremost, we're just providing some entertainment for people that aren't travelling to these places. For many, many people, they will probably never get to these locations that we visit. And so it's just a way of them travelling vicariously through us. And I don't think there's any harm in that. And it's something that we've done for the last century. We have travelled vicariously through the adventures of Attenborough, for example. Yeah. There's a good example. David Attenborough. Not that I'm comparing us to David Attenborough, but, for an entire generation or two generations, he has been travelling around the world, going to these remote locations. And, watching him, I can't ever think, I must go there, and have made a point to get to the locations he's visited. I've just enjoyed them for what they are.
Yeah, so that's a very good reason for why it's not a bad thing, isn't it? I mean, a lot of our supporters said that. A lot of them said, well, no one's going to go there. And even if they do, it's only be a handful of people. So bringing it into people's lives, into living, and you know, some of our sailing followers have said, this is great, I'm going to put it on my map of places to go and visit. And I find that really encouraging, that they want to go and see these things. So yeah, that is a good point. Amanda Dunstan, she says, YouTube channels I watch are mostly educational and shine a torch on so much more than a tourist brochure or a beach. And I think she's right there, because we try and show the local culture, and as much as we can on Follow the Boat, we interact and we talk to them as well about stuff, don't we?
Well, so here's the interesting thing we do, but we are aware of other, not just sailing channels, but perhaps other travel channels have different ways of documenting, i.e. vlogging their adventures. I think perhaps because we're older and uglier, we tend to turn the camera away from us and onto the local people. But there is a style of vlogging where it is all about the person who's doing the vlogging.
Yeah, we'll come on to influencers and vloggers that behave like that in a little bit. I just want to talk about the reasons why it is a good thing right now. So it's raising awareness for people watching. It's allowing people who watch to go to places they'd never normally see. What else? I mean, Monique from Discord, her reaction to the video where we talk to lovely Joe and we go around the island, and he brings it alive and we meet lots of local people. She says, I watched the episode and thought we shouldn't promote the area. She said then Joe was saying he wanted more tourists so they could get an income. And that's the point, isn't it? That's what people tend to forget.
It's very difficult, I think, for us as outsiders to dictate what these local people want. And as you say, in that particular example, we could see Joe was saying, we want the tourism. Of course, under sort of control, not allowing it to run away as it has done in many places around the world. So they do want some kind of control over it. But I don't think he could have emphasised the point enough that tourism was important to the local economy.
Yeah, and when we see lots of fishermen who are out of work, certainly during certain seasons they can't get so much work, they don't work all the time, and a lot of them were turning their hands, to trying to make some money some way. But when the tourist places are there, the hotels and whatnot, they use carpenters, and Joe himself, as an electrician, they turn their hands to all kinds of things, as well as their basic fishing, for which they don't get paid very much. So he was saying how much they really want tourism, but he qualified it big time. He said to me, I don't know if you caught it, but he was working on Gili Tea, which is one of the northern gillies. It's the big party gilly. Gili means island, by the way, that Bali people go to, and he disliked it. He really did. He thought the tourists there completely had no interest at all in the culture of Bali or Lombok, or certainly the island. Didn't get to know him, didn't talk to any of the locals. They're just out partying, getting drunk and taking their clothes off.
Now, whose fault is that, and who has control of that? How do you deal with that? It's a difficult one. We've seen only very recently how Bali has kicked back at this and has said, you know what, we've had enough of these drunk tourists parading around semi-naked and quite often naked, having sex on the beach and getting into all sorts of troubles hiring scooters. I think they're now planning to actually ban scooter hire altogether on Bali. Yep.
Blimey.
I think that's an example of where tourism really has affected a place to the point where the local authorities have said, you know what, we need to claw this back.
Yeah, and we having spoken to people all around the world from Turkey to here, have talked to local people, spent a bit of time with them, and found out what they really think of the tourists, and it's not very nice, is it?
Well, I think in Joe's example on Gili Gedi, he obviously sees neighbouring Bali and sees what has happened to it. Actually, if anything, it's quite a good thing because it's a little case study. It's a case study for the other less developed places to look at Bali and say, okay, they benefited from tourism, but it perhaps went a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could use this as a basic tourism model, but we will ensure that we don't allow, people to behave in certain ways in public that are perhaps disrespectful to the local culture.
That was what it was all about, wasn't it? It's very much the local culture. He couldn't see why people would come to this part of the world from the opposite side of the globe and not want to know about the local culture, not try the local food and go out on the local fishing boats perhaps, go to the warrens. They prefer to eat in their 5-star hotels or resorts and not come out, which is fair enough. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But he found it incomprehensible that people would do that. On Gilly Giddy, they have got a few resorts, a very small, one small luxury resort, and he's happy with that, and the locals are happy with that. 1 or 2 others have folded, and they'd like to see them come back to life. But he says, on the whole, most of the tourists that come to Gilly Giddy do respect them.
I think because it's not on the tourist map, it's not going to attract your average, 2-week holiday who would much prefer to just spend 2 weeks on a beach, which again, completely nothing wrong with that. Perhaps it's a different type of tourism that they're trying to attract, because he did emphasise how he wanted people to learn their local culture. And of course, not all holiday makers want to do that.
No, definitely. They need a break, and they just want some sun and fun. So that wouldn't be the right place to go. And as you know, that's what was said in quite a lot of the comments. You know, the people who want to go to these more out of the way, remote, unusual places tend to have a reason to want to do that. It takes longer to get there, it's difficult to get there, sometimes you can't even get to unless you're on your own boat. So they're going to not be going for that kind of holiday. So hopefully Gilly Giddy will continue to attract some tourists without being obliterated by the tourist trade, as it has done in some parts of the world. I mean, and we have seen where countries haven't liked it. We were talking, weren't we, about Malaysia and how different it is there. Say it's right next to Thailand, where there's all that overdevelopment, and then you suddenly go across the border on your boat, you leave Langkawi, you head south, and it's all gone.
I remember commenting on this as we left Penang and sailed north. Penang is a big island which you may have heard of off the west coast of Malaysia, and it's the last big island before Langkawi, which then turns into Thailand. We'd come down, I think, from Thailand having seen literally every single coast where there was a beach, there was some kind of tourism activity going on.
In Thailand?
In Thailand.
Yeah.
And then as you cross the border, you're seeing the same type of beaches, because obviously it's the same coastline. There's nothing.
I know. And even little tiny islands with sandy beaches.
Nothing at all.
Nothing there. And why is that? Is that because Malaysia won't let them develop it? I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, maybe the local tourism within Malaysia is a little different. Perhaps local Malaysians like to holiday or go do weekend trips perhaps a little bit differently. I don't know. But yeah, there must be some kind of control going on to not allow development, because any developer worth their salt would see these beautiful coastlines and say, yep, right, we've got to stick a 5-star hotel here and some water sport facilities there, and yet they haven't. So I guess there is some kind of control going on.
Yeah, so...
I mean, Thailand is a good example, and specifically Phuket, from what we've seen, where I think tourism has gone way over the top. This is pre-COVID, of course, but we saw, I think it was about 30 boats turn up on one particular island that we had anchored at. And it was literally boat after boat after boat coming in, dropping off 30 tourists at a time, backing up onto the beach, tourists playing around in the water, again, 30 at a time. So you imagine you've got 10 boats next to each other, they'd leave and then they'd be replaced by another 10 boats. I mean, it was just chaos and carnage. And there is absolutely no way that island could survive from an environmental point of view.
You're talking about Phi Phi?
No, it wasn't Phi Phi, no. It was, I can't remember the name of the island now, a much quieter island.
Right.
But it was still on the tourist trail. And I think that was an example of where there was absolutely no control at all. It was a money grab.
Yes. Was it, oh gosh, who is it? Salty Lass said that. The people who cart shed loads of people into remote areas are holiday companies and government marketing agencies. They have a reach that far, far outstrips YouTube channels and the ability to start building resorts and exploiting these undeveloped spots. So yeah, in that case, that was the charter companies and the government pushing them.
I guess so. I mean, I don't understand, because there were park rangers on that island as well. It was it was part of the national park in
Oh,
that
I
area.
know the islands you mean. The split ones with the channel, beautiful
That's
channel.
correct,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But there was just no control, and that's what I just could not get my head around. As you said, there should be some kind of control over how many visitors they have. You take Sipadan, for example, where we went diving last year. We know for a fact that they only allow 150 people per day to visit the island. And that is strictly controlled.
And that was because it was overrun, and it was in a terrible state. There was pollution all around the island and all around the place there. To be honest, there's still a lot of plastic hanging around there, but that's everywhere. But that was the right thing to do. So Sipadan was part of Sabah, which was part of Malaysia. So that was Malaysia taking control. And in fact, in Thailand, they took control, didn't they, for a short while at PP, stopped.
Closed it down, didn't
Closed
they?
it down, and it did start to regenerate the
I
coral.
think they finally realised that they were destroying, in the short term, they were destroying the things
Yeah.
that were attracting the tourists.
Yeah.
And they had to do something about it. We did visit PP. We had to wait outside until 5 in the evening before we could get an anchor inside the bay. And by 8 in the morning next morning, again, it was just carnage. Going back to what we're talking about, how do YouTubers affect those situations negatively? Because they've already been affected.
Yeah, exactly. Places like that. They're not the remote spots, though.
No.
Those are places that are well up, right up there, big on the tourist trail. And there is a whole discussion to be had about whether tourism is good or not. Crew of Solitude said, I believe there should be a cap on tourism in many places because of the negative impact on the species and environment, as well as the people who live there. Yeah, and I think everyone's aware about the environmental impact, but they tend to forget about the people, the local people there. They get impacted just as much as the ecology of the place.
And quite often it's not the fault of the local people.
No.
I mean, okay, yes, certainly in a lot of places, the local people are as much responsible for the destruction of their environment as the visiting tourists. And I'm talking specifically about plastic wastage here. But quite often it is outside their control, especially with plastic in the water, which gets washed up on the beaches. And it travels for hundreds, if not thousands of miles from somewhere else.
Yes, I think it's a bit of both. Yes, but the tourism, though, tends to be out of their control because most of the developments we see are not locally owned. They're quite often foreigners who partner up with a local, and at the moment here we've got Marriott and places like that, building big hotels right next to Komodo Park. Bearpaw, who am I, living with all the Western advantages of clean water, varied food, healthcare, etc., to tell other people that they must live without them? I think that's a very good point. Sorry for interrupting, but while I've got you here, if you like what we do and you want to support us and become a Patreon, or join us on FTB Mates, or even drop a quid in the rum fund, go to followtheboat.com/pub. Of course, come to the pub.
Bearpaw's comment on Discord, I completely agree with. We have to be careful about dictating our own values on to these local people. I think someone else had mentioned that for a lot of these people, they live a sustainable lifestyle as they currently live. And it's probably quite difficult for them to not fall into the trap of looking at what Westerners have in terms of material goods. He says with a phone in his hand, this kind of thing. For them to want the same thing, and for them to get the same thing, of course, they are going to have to change their lifestyle, which means moving away from their, could you call it, basic self-sustainable lifestyle, fishing every day just to put food on the table at the end of the day. They'd have to completely change their lifestyle to have the trappings of the West.
Yes.
I guess that is something for the local people to decide if they want. But we all know how easy it is to fall into that trap of wanting more, wanting something better, thinking that all of these trappings will improve your lifestyle when in fact it makes life more complicated sometimes.
Yeah. We're getting on to a whole kind of, I suppose you could call it, political debate, couldn't we, now, about material things, how important they are and why we feel it's increasing the number of things you've got is important. Is that because we're told that it's important in the West? constantly being told to buy this and buy that and update this and do that more. It's part of our lives. It's the way we're brought up, isn't it?
It is.
And the opposite's true of these islands and the islands we've been to, where entire cultures and communities spend all their time reusing.
Yeah, but they do, absolutely. But I'm curious to know if these, let's call them islanders, because in this situation they are mainly on islands. I wonder how they feel. Are they happy with their lifestyle, their current lifestyle, their self-sustainable day-to-day lifestyle? Certainly from what we see objectively, looking in as tourists, they all seem to be pretty happy.
Joe was saying that, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I know it's not that simple, of course. It is always more complex than that. But they appear to be happy. And do they want these trappings that they would get? If a big hotel was built on that beach, they would all get better paid jobs. They would increase their income. They would be able to afford some of these things that we have in the West. But do they think that it will improve their lifestyle?
Well, it's very difficult for people who haven't experienced what we have or come from where we are to compare it with anything. So it's kind of, it's what happens next. Oh, there's a load of people over there building something and maybe I can get a job. Sometimes I don't think people can think beyond that because you've not had the education, the experience to think beyond that. It's only Joe, because he left and went into other places, discovered what was going on elsewhere and didn't like it at all, and came back and decided, I prefer it here. Whereas we know that many of the people on that island have not come off that island. They may know a few other islands, they may know a little bit of the coast at the bottom of Lombok, but really that world is their world. I don't want to sound patronising here, but that is the truth. I don't know.
I mean, we've met a number of people who have never left their village.
Yeah.
I remember the first time we came across that, we met an old boy who was well into his 80s, and someone explained to us that he had never left the village.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a comment that I read, and I'm sorry I can't remember who put it, but they pointed out that bringing in prosperity into a place is not always a good thing. They were talking about how locals then get priced out. And you could take that right back to the UK, where we've got a big problem in the southwest. Cornwall and Devon are beautiful counties, and they have become incredibly popular. There's a lot of surfing on the north coast, isn't there, at Devon and places like that, and some beautiful old fishing villages. It's stunning. So what's happened is that the out-of-towners, particularly the Londoners and those with money, have discovered this place and bought themselves second homes, and now the people who are born there can't afford to live there because the prices are Kensington prices. Mm-hmm. It's a huge crisis. That's just in the UK. What would happen on the islands? Same thing? Don't know. Would they be cleared out? How many of these very small, perhaps not picturesque villages with their ramshackle little huts would be cleared off the beach?
Yes, I'm not sure about that. What we've found in a lot of these villages is that there is normally a head of the village. There is some kind of local government, an organisation that represents the villagers. I don't think they would allow it to get that far. It's interesting as we sit here just off Labuan Bajo on the west side of Flores. We've taken a few scooter trips now, and on the northwest corner there's a whole strip maybe of 5 miles of coastline where it is just development of 5-star hotels.
No access to the beach allowed.
I didn't tell you yesterday. I actually tried to get the scooter. I went to one of these hotels and the security guard stopped me and he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I thought I'd go to the restaurant or bar." And he said, no, you can't do that. I said, "But all I want to do is just get a drink." He said, no, residents only. Completely off limits. No access, not even to me as a tourist.
It's a huge stretch of white sand beach and nobody can go on it apart from the privileged few who go and stay in that hotel.
So the question is, were there local people living there beforehand? Are local fishermen still allowed to access that part of the water? I don't know, but you can guarantee that if there was some kind of local government in charge of the local people, 2 things will have happened. Either they will say, no, this is our land, you cannot develop here, or they would have been paid off.
They would have been paid off. We know specifically that that's happened around the world. Now, going back to, you're talking about that exact subject, going back to Anambas, first time we went there was 2017, And there was one small island down the south that had development, but nobody else did. So the whole of the Anambas Islands, which are beautiful, stunning little islands in the middle of the South China Sea that belong to Indonesia, you literally met nobody apart from locals there. And we had a lovely time. Spent probably far too long there. Talked to lots of people there, and you could anchor anywhere in the most beautiful spots. If you look back over our videos, you'll find it, and it is stunning. Anyway, then went back 2 years later, and the one spot, Moon Rock Bay, now can't anchor there. New hotel being set up, a eco hotel for eco people, for eco tourists who want to come and spend thousands of pounds to camp out on the land in the way that the fishermen have done forever. You now can't fish there. So the fishermen who used to go there all the time to do their fishing, they've been banned.
Yeah, I don't know if they've been banned.
They have.
Have they though, or is it just the people who are running that hotel dissuading them, pushing them off? I mean, what rights do these people running this eco lodge have?
I don't know who banned them, but I do know that our guide, Iski, said that the fishermen got so angry they went along and demonstrated and said, these waters have been ours for generations. You can't come in and tell us we can't fish here anymore. I don't know what happened. That was 2019, it's 4 years ago. So I don't know what's happened. The other thing while we were there is we did meet government officials from the tourist office, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Who wanted to talk to us about setting up tourism over there and how good it would be. And, we just held our breath and
So this is all leading nicely into a big part of this discussion, which is how the blame cannot be placed on YouTubers like ourselves. I think there are people who are far more accountable for contributing to mass tourism than us YouTubers and travel influencers or whatever you want to call us.
Did you know that liking and subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts helps us to get noticed? Go on, give us a helping hand.
So we can argue to death that we as YouTubers have no impact on tourism, but we know that there are huge discussions out there about the influencer effect. This quite often applies to Instagram more than any other social media, because we're talking about beautiful bikini-clad women and gorgeous buff men posing in these exotic locations, spending ages to get that perfect shot of themselves in these exotic locations, just to get likes.
Right.
Posting up pictures of themselves to be seen to be living this great life.
Is this something you've just made up, or is this something you've researched?
It is well documented.
Right.
I had a cursory Google yesterday.
Okay.
And there are a ton of articles on this phenomenon. And just some examples of headlines. Liked to death. Is Instagram and social media ruining travel? That's by Expert Vagabond, who's a travel blogger. The impacts of travel content on YouTube and Instagram, which is a thesis someone wrote. Have Instagram influencers ruined travel for an entire generation, which is an article that appeared in Forbes. Can daily vlogging ruin travel, which is a YouTuber put that together. Insider.com, 15 destinations Instagram has helped ruin. And there are a number of articles where they have listed places.
Oh, like where?
Do you want me to go through them?
Well, just quickly.
Okay. Well, we've seen, not necessarily perhaps Instagram, but we know, for example, that Everest Base Camp, they had to close it for a year because it got covered in litter.
Yeah.
And it was just being overrun, and they couldn't manage it. So many people were visiting that. Wyoming Tourism Board have asked people to stop geotagging photos, and this is another problem. And of course, we do this on our YouTube episodes. We tell people exactly where these places are. On Instagram, of course, when you take a photo with any camera these days, it will have the GPS coordinates of your location, and so people can research that on Instagram. Justin Bieber shot a video in Iceland, and in the next 2 years they saw the tourism of this particular location increased by up to 80% over the next 2 years. There are many. There's even a place in Paris where the locals are now asking the local council to put in gates to their beautiful road that they live on because it's being descended upon by Instagrammers during the golden hour, and they want the gates closed at the
Right.
golden hour. The golden hour, by the way, is the best time to take your photos. It's sunrise and sunset.
So are we blaming influence for this, or is it just because more people are travelling?
Well, this is the question. There are counter articles. I came across one the other day where people are saying, look, stop pointing the blame at influencers. It's not just influencers that are causing this. Tourism generally on the whole is on the increase. More and more people are travelling, and so it's inevitable we're going to see these places become more popular.
And we've got so many apps and all this sort of online stuff now that show us all of it. Whereas in the olden days, you used to have to go to the library or find a book about it and look it all up. It's all immediate. It's in your face all the time. And photography is massive now. It's almost gone from photography to video now. You can't do anything without putting one or the other up. And so they're there. They're all there. They're out all the time. Photography is what it's all about.
But I don't think we can discount this
Right.
influencer phenomenon, though. There are more examples. There's even a sunflower farm, a lavender farm in Surrey.
Right.
And they used to charge visitors to come and take photos of themselves
Yes.
in the lavender fields. But I think what happened was someone put up a picture and suddenly they got an influx of tourism. And they're now asking Instagrammers to stay away at the weekends,
Gosh.
because they're getting so many people trying to get that picture of themselves just to post up on social media to get the likes and the subscribers.
Well, homeless pics on Instagram, funnily enough, on our Instagram, backed up what you said about Iceland, for example, has a population of 380,000 and expected tourism of 2 million. So, all of a sudden 2 million people come out over a year. But he says there are places that have been ruined by too much tourism. Take, for instance, Chernobyl. Would you believe it? It has a problem where people are moving things around just to get that perfect image for Instagram, touching radioactive stuff for a good picture. People are putting themselves and others at risk for an image to get likes on the internet.
And I think that's a lot of what it's all about. It is about, getting these likes. And it's interesting how a lot of these photos are faked, posed, contrived, set up. There was an article written for Brat Guides, of all people. Brat, the travel guide for the more cerebral traveller, who you know well because you won a writing competition for them.
Yes, I've written for them, yeah.
And they wrote an article, Is Instagram Ruining Travel? And the person who wrote it said, yes, that tourism is good for the local people, but the problem is Instagram is all about likes. And this person watched a group of girls in their bikinis posing with a pineapple cocktail on the beach for 45 minutes, taking photos of themselves. Just 45 minutes, just each posing to get the perfect shot. And she said, not once did any of the girls dip their toes in the beautiful ocean.
I don't want to ruin the makeup.
Or look up and take in the surroundings.
Like the sunsets that we see, the sunsets around here are incredible, and you'll get a whole load of, it's usually girls, sometimes buff men, actually, it's not just women, who have their backs to the sunset, taking photographs of themselves with the sunset behind them. Your point about us pointing the camera out, I think is very true, so I'm quite glad that we do that. Mind you, no one wants to see us.
Well, but the counter argument to that is that because we're old and ugly, people don't want to see us. So we think it's more interesting to show people around us, cultures, local people. But by doing that, we are showing people where these places are. So there is an argument that suggests that other YouTubers who do the opposite, who prefer pointing the camera at themselves, don't even mention the location that they happen to be travelling.
Okay, there's a lot. It's so nuanced. There's so many different things here. I don't really know what we're saying. I think we started off by saying our YouTubers destroying the planet by showing very remote places, and I would imagine, I don't know whether it came up in your research, that a lot of these influencers are not in the most remote places, really,
Not necessarily.
or unknown places.
But I think it's worth remembering that a lot of these influencers are paid. They're getting kickbacks.
Yeah.
So some of these travel influencers are getting to stay in these locations for free.
Yeah.
and locations that you and I would pay hundreds, if not thousands of pounds for.
No, we wouldn't.
Well, of course we wouldn't,
Yeah.
but the average person looking at their Instagram feed
Right.
would look at them and say, oh, wow, that place looks amazing. I'd love to go there. And then they look up the prices and realise they can't afford it. So there's a little bit of envy, I suppose, influencer envy, I'm sure, by all the followers of these influencers. But then they get there and find that it doesn't look anything like what the influencer posted up because they spent 2 hours photoshopping the picture to get rid of the telegraph pylons.
Well, we know all that. Of course they do. And if you don't know that, they do. It's all lies. What you're seeing is lies. People don't look like that. They have got marks on their skin and they're not all perfectly formed or with great big bums, which apparently is what people should have these days.
But the thing is, people fall for it. In that Brad article, the author goes on to explain about a girl who did an experiment on Facebook, and she used an app to make herself look 10 years younger,
Yeah, there are loads of them.
and then faked photos of a trip to Disneyland Paris. So she overlaid photos on top of herself, posted them up on Facebook. Not one person
No.
questioned it.
It's happening all around us, all of the time. And now we've got AI that is making stuff up itself. How much of what we see is going to be real? I mean, it's opening up a whole new can of worms, isn't it? These, virtual trips around the world, we're all going to be able to go anywhere, which in some ways is good. It's good for people who can't get off the couch, who don't have the means or the physical ability to travel. They're going to be able to be immersed completely in the experience soon, aren't they?
Yep. Or you could take a leaf out of China's book. Here's a couple of articles I read.
Oh yeah.
China, as a whole, is replicating tourist spots. So did you know there is an Eiffel Tower in
Right.
China? So they've actually replicated the Eiffel Tower itself and the whole boulevard.
Well, America's been doing that. There's the
They've-
Venice in the middle of Nevada.
They've replicated the Colosseum.
Right.
They've replicated all sorts of things. So great way of keeping the local people within China and not travelling abroad.
Right, yes. I see, yes. So they don't really want their people to travel abroad, from what we understand. But,
Yes.
but also good for people who can't afford to travel abroad. It's all becoming a bit blurred around the edges of reality and made up stuff, isn't it?
Do you like our coffee mugs? You can get your own from our shop. Find them at followtheboat.com/shop.
I just thought of some solutions
Go on
as
then.
to how we address this mass tourism. I mean, we talked about Bali,
Yeah.
who finally have come to realise that they can't carry on at the rate that they are developing or taking in all these tourists. And we talked about PP, Thailand. Finally, they realised they were actually destroying their own backyard, which in the longer term was going to affect tourism. So they have put, in place restrictions on tourism, which is great. We talked about Iceland, and I mentioned this particular Justin Bieber music video that attracted all these people. And the local government in charge of this particular location admitted that the infrastructure wasn't there to maintain all of these visitors. And they kind of shone the light back on themselves by saying, we realise we need to improve the infrastructure. So that was one thing that they did. They addressed this by realising more tourists are going to come, not just because of Justin Bieber, but tourism generally, as we said, is growing.
So that would benefit the local people. So they recognise that tourism is they're getting more tourists, and they need to look after tourists so they can get around the island. As a byproduct, they're helping the locals as well. It's a shame they couldn't do that without the tourism dollar in the first place. Maybe they couldn't afford it. I'd like to see more countries doing that for the people anyway. Certainly the people of Gili Gedi could do with one road. They haven't got any. It's all tracks. And they don't even have water. And yet, we've talked about this before, on Lombok they've got a great big development that the government is sinking billions of dollars into a whole new tourist development. Well, just look across the pond and look after your locals.
India, of course, have been charging foreign tourists 10 times as much, is it, to visit local places as the
Yeah,
local people are charged?
When we were there, UNESCO sites were 10 times the price that locals. I don't mind that. We've got a lot more money. Why shouldn't we pay more?
I think a lot of people will argue against you and say it's unfair.
Don't care what they think, because I'm thinking about the Indian people. In some places, so perhaps India and certainly other places we've been to, it's free for locals. They live there. They're not destroying the environment in the way we are, perhaps, but that's another avenue to go down. But they don't have the income, and their average income is so much less. It's perhaps sometimes less than what we earn in a day, they'll earn in a month. So they shouldn't be expected to pay on the same level. It's a different playing field. Let them pay less and let us pay more, because as foreign tourists we can afford it.
I've just got to mention Joey B. Tunes.
Go on then.
For those who are not aware of him, he's actually I think he was originally a cartoonist, and he's exploded on YouTube because he does a podcast, but he puts out videos as well. He highlights the idiocracy of social media, TikTokers, Instagrammers, basically anyone with a video camera. You've got to see him to understand just how funny this guy is, but he calls all of these influencers out. And coincidentally, only yesterday, his latest video is all about tourists. And there are some hilarious clips.
We'll put a link in the descriptions. Hopefully you'll be able to see it.
Of idiotic tourists with cameras trying to get close to wild warthogs and deer with big antlers, who then turn on them and chase them. And but you've got to see it.
It's Joey B. Tunes.
Tunes, Toonz, I think.
Tunes. Okay.
Yes, Joey B. Tunes.
And it's always hashtag idiocracy in the title, isn't it?
Quite often. If you're not aware, there is a movie called Idiocracy, which is coming true. But I left a comment on his video just saying, we're going to do a podcast about this. And someone replied saying that they worked on cruise ships for 6 years. And he said most tourists treat wherever they go like they're at an amusement park. Yes. They can't admire from afar or with humble patience. They need that constant sensory overload. Which I thought was an interesting observation from someone that's actually worked in the industry. Of course, I would say the big cruise ship tourism industry is quite different from what we do.
Yeah, although having said that, I have seen YouTubers and people, or not YouTubers, sailors, cruisers, our age, behaving like that, touching things, ancient things that they should not be touching. You're not supposed to touch ancient sites, and certainly touching wildlife. Don't try and prod some fish or some object that you see under. Don't touch it. You don't have to touch it. Leave it alone. And I think it's the same with islands. Look at them, appreciate how beautiful they are, some of these places that we've been to, but don't start poking them around and trying to change them. Ask them. If they want some help, then give it, but ask them first. Don't be so bloody arrogant as to think that you're better and you can bring them stuff that they may not want in the first place. Sorry.
Rant over?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's an interesting discussion. But, what I think, these are my thoughts.
Go on.
Is that, yes, there is an element of influencer influence on poor people who look longingly at their lifestyles and want a piece of the action. But on the whole, I don't think these people have much of an impact on tourism generally per se.
Right.
I think there are far greater influences, and we talked about that, and it could be the local government, it could just be the local politics that's going on. It's investors, the big hotel owners, that kind of thing, that are having a far greater impact on the local tourism.
Yes, that bear paw comment. I've seen native places and culture destroyed by mining, fishing, logging, farming, manufacturing and religion, all of which are far more destructive than tourism. So he's kind of saying what you said there.
Yeah, I'd definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think also perhaps there's a little bit of, certainly some annoyance with what we are doing. Some people are kind of just niggled by it, by the fact that we're actually visiting these places.
Yes.
and feel that we shouldn't be highlighting these places, and they only feel this way because, I don't know, perhaps because they're not visiting it themselves, or
who knows what goes on in some of these people's heads. But I think we've tried to present a kind of balance here of reasons why you should and reasons why you shouldn't. I don't think we're going to change. I think we're going to carry on showing the places that we go to, but hopefully with respect and an interest in the culture, not just the beaches and the jet skis, but the, under the skin of the place. I think we will always do that. And I don't think it's going to appeal to the same audience that those influencers you were talking about.
No, probably not. And as I said earlier, we do have this little echo chamber.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of the people who left comments are our followers. And by the way, we thank you all so much for leaving your comments. We got loads of comments on this particular subject, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I have to say, an overwhelming level of support from the sort of videos that we put out that people genuinely find interesting.
Which is great, because they interest us, and to know that someone else is interested in also in what we're showing is makes it all worthwhile. So, do we think that's it for now?
I think we've done this one, but of course we would love to hear from you all. So leave us your comments.
Yeah.
And you're pointing at something here.
Yeah, there's a comment on screen from one of our Discordians,
Yes.
which I think kind of sums it all up. So in response to our question, will it bring the wrong kind of tourism? Is it better to keep these places secret? He says, Dallas Powie, that's like blaming National Geographic for global warming or Cousteau for destroying the reefs. I learned from Cousteau and National Geographic to love the world and take care of it. Could some YouTubers do a better job of being responsible? Maybe. But most of the YouTube channels I follow show great respect for the people and environments they introduce to their audiences.
Yes, and most of the comments were along those lines.
Yeah, they were.
So we thank you for that. By the way, on a completely separate subject,
Yes.
we keep forgetting,
Yes.
bit of housekeeping here, we keep forgetting to announce the winner of our photography competition,
Dun, 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 dun.
which we actually ran now over a month ago on Discord. And the winner is Decas. And that's David, who lives in Vietnam. And he left this beautiful picture of a little fishing boat within the canals of Vietnam. Now, the rule was to take the photo of your environment within 1 mile of your home. It just so happens that David lives in this area. So it was literally 1 mile from his home. But it's a lovely black and white photo. If you want to go and see it, go and check it out on Discord.
Great, okay.
And there's one other thing that
yeah.
we should mention, of course, is the Sailing Voyager Ocean Cruises podcast.
Gosh, yes.
We forgot to mention this. We were chatting to Andy, who runs this particular podcast, and he interviewed us. It wasn't so much an interview, it was just a good old natter, wasn't it?
Yeah, because he's British as well, so got the same humour and, similar-ish understanding of life, and it was just a chat, and it was great. It was really good to be on the other end of the interviewing stick for a change.
Yes, it was good fun. So obviously he puts his podcast out on the usual audio podcast channels, but he too actually puts it out on YouTube as well.
Okay.
But we'll leave links in the description to this podcast. Go and check it out. And his last interview he did was Brian of Delos. So he's getting to interview, quite a lot of the big names.
Yeah.
Are we done?
I think we're done. I think we should wrap up now. It's been going on for far too long.
Yes, I need another coffee.
Yeah, me too.
Desperate for one.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.